Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto explaining, bringing you guys another Boruto Two Blue Vortex discussion. Today, I want to talk to you guys about why all this noise surrounding Konohamaru not destroying Matsuri is not only misplaced, but I believe it's gone underappreciated by a lot of fans. And I'm going to take some time right now and say this is why I am a big proponent of Viz Media using translator notes in the manga chapters or placing them in the physical copies of the manga on the back end of the volumes itself. Is something that Viz Media has moved away from the last decade with the manga that they have distribution rights for in the West. Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where I hope to shed some much needed light and discourse on this entire situation so we can paint a full picture as to what Ikimoto is currently doing in the story. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the chapter review. I'll leave that in the end credits of this video. Also, if you are a One Piece fan, my first lore video on my Everything One Piece Explained channel is up, going over the Gomu Gomu no Mi Devil Fruit, so check that out if you're a One Piece fan. Do believe you'll enjoy the editing on that one. So with that being said, let's dive into this much needed discussion. Konohamaru's hesitation to eliminate Matsuri, a Shinju entity formed from Moegi's chakra, is deeply rooted in the intricate interplay of personal emotions, cultural nuances, and traditional folklore. So we're going to start with a very brief folklore reference. In the past, you've heard me talk about the snow woman for Matsuri. So for this video, we'll use something different because the example here will be the Ame no Jaku, a demon known for provoking humans into actions against their desires or giving into their desires depending on the situation, and it almost always leads to a tragic outcome. This mirrors Matsuri in terms of her existence and actions. They're compelling Konohamaru to confront his feelings for Moegi, which is where this entire emotional landmine has been triggered, and the gravity of why he couldn't finish off Matsuri with the Rasengan has gone missed by many. So the emotional conflict and cultural nuances are what we have to look at. In Japanese culture, expressions of romantic feelings, they are often subtle and understated compared to the more overt displays that are common in Western societies. And 53% of you guys watching this video are in America. So here's the thing, physical gestures such as hugging and holding hands that are prevalent among couples in the West, it carries significant weight and are oftentimes reserved for more intimate and private moments when you look at Japanese culture. This cultural context, it sheds lights onto Matsuri's flustered reaction when holding Konohamaru's hand. Such an act signifies a profound emotional connection, making her vulnerable and ultimately leading to her momentary lapse in guard. To further explain what I mean, I want to dig even deeper into Japanese culture than I have in the past. So think of this more like learning something like when I talk about the divorce culture in Japan, like I did in that big video going over the confirmed identity of Metal Lee's mom. So the cultural context, first we have to look at how Japan views physical affection in detail. So in Japan, PDA, as in public displays of affection, such as hugging, holding hands, kissing, they are much more reserved compared to American culture, North American culture. While this is gradually changing among younger generations due to the growing influence of Western culture in the East, traditional Japanese values still prioritize modesty and subtlety in romantic expressions. And while Ikimoto is younger than Kishimoto by a few years, he's still someone who grew up in that more traditional era of Japan culture, and some of it still bleeds into how he writes, even though he's a little more tapped into the youth vibe than someone like Kishi was. It's still there. So why is this the case exactly? So the historical influence basically comes down to Japan has been long influenced by Confucianism and Buddhism, both of which they emphasize restraint, humility, and respect for personal space. Unlike in the West, where emotions are encouraged to be openly expressed, Japanese culture often values unspoken gestures over their direct physical affection. Group harmony is the next thing to look at. So Japanese society operates on the principle of harmony, which discourages overly individualistic expressions of love in public. Too much PDA can be seen as being disruptive to the surrounding environment. There's also the issue of personal boundaries. Japanese people typically have a larger personal space bubble compared to Westerners, meaning physical contact, it is generally reserved for very close relationships. So let's look at some of the differences between America versus Japan and romantic gestures. So in Western culture, hugging, that's something that's casual, even among friends. It's no big deal if you hug your friends. It's frequent in relationships, whereas in Japan, hugs are reserved for lovers, close family, and emotional moments. As we talked about in that Sumire video, was she a gaslighter? That's part of why she crashed out on Sarada. Then you get into holding hands, which is a big thing in this chapter. It's common for couples in the West, sometimes even for close friends. Whereas in Japan, holding hands is seen as very intimate. It is a big step in romance. That's why Konohamaru in the chapter is saying like, hey, like that's what people in relationships do. Then you get into kissing in public. It's not something uncommon for you to see two people kissing if they're in a relationship out in public. It might be a kiss goodbye, hello, whatever. You might be sitting at the restaurant and you might see a couple kiss briefly. Whereas in Japan, it is viewed as rare because it is mostly seen in private settings. Then you get into the verbal stuff of like, I love you. That is frequently said in relationships, and it's not just for romantic sense. You can tell somebody, I love you like a brother. If you have a very rare example of a opposite sex friend, you can say, I love you, and it's completely platonic. Whereas over in Japan, it's not as common in terms of it being said in that way. Instead, emotions are shown through actions. The phrase actions speak louder than words, that applies here. This is another thing you have to look at. So Western fans might not realize that something as simple as holding hands or hugging in Japanese media, it is a big deal. Next time you watch anime, when you see that, that is a really big deal because these are actions that are so common and casual in Western relationships. Again, with some of the younger mangaka, the ones that are in their 20s and early 30s, that's changing a little bit because the culture's changing a bit over there. But when you get into stories written by older gentlemen, you still see some of that conservative nature that Japan had in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. For example, in America, a couple holding hands on the first date, normal. A hug goodbye between romantic partners, that's expected. Even with platonic friends, they hug casually. However, in Japan, holding hands, that's the equivalent of saying, I really like you in many cases. In couples, they typically only do this when they're already official. Hugging is rare, even between long-term partners. It's more common when someone is upset or they need emotional comfort or you've gone through a shared traumatic experience. That's completely okay. Hugging serves a purpose. Under those circumstances, things of that nature, it makes it more intimate than what you have in Western culture. To a certain degree, we kind of whore out things like hugs and kisses and holding hands when you really think about it. This is why Matsuri holding Konohamaru's hand in Boruto Two Blue Vortex was such a major emotional moment. It went over a lot of our heads because we're not from that culture. It symbolized a deep vulnerability and an emotional connection, even though Matsuri was ultimately an enemy. And that's why Ada, in the last chapter before this, was saying like, hey, Konohamaru, you dummy, she wants something more than just to call you Konohamaru-chan. Now, the other thing on here is that I think part of the reason why fans are missing the importance behind Matsuri's reactions is it kind of goes, again, back to the culture stuff. Matsuri blushing and having a flustered reaction when around Konohamaru, it wasn't something simple. It's like, oh, look at this, tee-hee, she's in love with Konohamaru. It's a little bit more than that. Many Western fans might not understand why Matsuri's blushing and looking vulnerable after touching Konohamaru as being a big deal, after being alone with him, why that's a big deal. In Japanese media, a female character blushing while holding hands or in that super close proximity, it is often portrayed as an intense romantic moment. It's not something that should be viewed as casual. And in an arc like this where it's going through the human experience and it's looking at the different forms of love, that's why you're seeing this. Then you have Konohamaru's hesitation and his very strong emotional conflict, something that Konohamaru's been getting dragged for. So if this were an American show, Konohamaru freezing up might seem like it's over dramatic to Western audiences, and that's what happened. Oh my god, bro, he had one job. Why didn't he just do the Rasengan and kill her? So in Japanese storytelling, small gestures like touching hands, it can trigger deep emotions and internal conflict. This should make you view Naruto and Hinata holding hands in the Fourth Ninja War a whole lot different now. This is especially the case since Matsuri is connected to Moegi, someone who Konohamaru has unresolved feelings for that are becoming very clear. Why Konohamaru's feelings for Moegi got triggered here, that's the next one we have to look at. So when Matsuri called him Konohamaru-chan, it immediately brought up memories of Moegi. Ikimoto basically gave us a whole page of that for a reason. She's the only person that he allows to call him that. The combination of Matsuri's touch, her voice, and her resemblance to Moegi, even loosely, it completely overwhelmed him. That's why this manga chapter zeroed in on her lips. That was a very intentional choice by Ikimoto here. His hesitation, it wasn't about fighting Matsuri. He could do that. It's about his realization of his feelings for Moegi and his confusion about whether or not he was fighting an enemy or something more personal. His head is all messed up, and it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the video with Matsuri being basically in a Menujaku. He is having to confront impulses inside of him that he has not had to confront before. Then you look at Konohamaru's reaction to Matsuri calling him Konohamaru-chan. It further underscores these cultural subtleties that a lot of Western fans don't fully grasp. There's a loose understanding because you got people that have probably watched like 300 anime, and so they've heard this for years now. So the suffix chan is an affectionate diminutive in Japanese, typically used among close friends or loved ones. Hearing Matsuri, it evokes those memories of Moegi, the only person that he permits to use that enduring term. This association triggers an internal conflict as Konohamaru grapples with his deep-seated feeling for Moegi, causing him to hesitate in that confrontation with Matsuri. So we're going to go deeper here because, again, as anime fans, you've probably heard someone call a male character Kun or a female character Chan, things of that nature, but how's this different? Well, you've heard me talk about before how Japanese to English is not a verbatim translation. It's a super context-heavy language. It requires big understanding of culture. It's a big part of the reason why I wish Viz Media did more of what Kodansha does with a lot of its titles that it releases, where it has those translator notes packed at the end of the chapters or at the end of the manga volumes themselves. Might have to charge a little extra, but it's worth it. So understanding Chan in Japanese culture is where we have to start. And I'm gonna go deeper than what you just normally get watching anime. So the Chan honorific, it is a diminutive suffix in Japanese. It's meant to express affection, closeness, endearment, and a sense of familiarity or a childhood connection. It is most commonly used with young children. So that's why you'll hear Momo-chan, for example. It's also something that is used for close female friends. Most importantly, it's meant for lovers and crushes. A girlfriend might call her boyfriend, say, Taka-chan. People that you see as being cute or precious, those are also people that you would refer to as Chan. However, using Chan for an adult male, it is rare and it carries deep implications. If you see a female character calling someone Chan and she's a grown woman, the way that Matsuri is, Moegi is, etc., this is why. So it's unusual because adult men are usually referred to as being called san. That's the polite way of referring to them, or just by their name. Calling an adult male by the word Chan, it makes it feel intimate, and that brings it down to the following things: a close childhood friend, a lover. It's usually meant to carry affection, and it carries extreme emotional weight. And also it could be being used as a condescending way if it's coming from a person that's not familiar with you. Given the context that we have with Moegi and Matsuri, those flashbacks of Moegi calling Konohamaru-chan, It's leaning more so in the dial of Moegi has unresolved feelings for Konohamaru that she has not come to grips with, and now we know Konohamaru has it. For Konohamaru, the only person who regularly calls him Konohamaru-chan is Moegi. That's why there's a huge psychological trigger, because it reminds him of Moegi, making him feel emotionally vulnerable. It forces him also to confront those unresolved feelings. It also disrupts his ability to see Matsuri as just an enemy. Again, that panel with Matsuri's lips, that was huge. There's a romantic undertone there. You do not make those lips as profound as they are with her saying Konohamaru-chan if there wasn't some kind of feeling in the background for Konohamaru towards Moegi. In essence, the honorific itself is not just a name. It carries a deep-seated emotional weight. That's why Konohamaru's reaction is as intense as it is. Konohamaru-chan is deeply personal to him. As mentioned before, that's only something Moegi calls him. Matsuri using it, it felt like an invasion of something deeply private, creating cognitive distance instantly. This is not just an enemy speaking. It sounds like someone he deeply cares for and trusts. Just the words themselves, knowing what Moegi's chakra produced in Matsuri. That's why it's hitting as hard as it did. The fact that Moegi still calls him Konohamaru-chan even as adults, they're in their 30s right now. Even in adulthood, with both of them being single, it means that their relationship, it is special. It is deeply ingrained from childhood, and there is something deeper behind it. By contrast, Matsuri using it makes him feel like he's being emotionally manipulated, even though it's unintentional. It's jarring because it makes Matsuri seem too close, too familiar to him, too intimate despite being an enemy. The cultural aspect of it comes down to words of endearment between opposite sex. They're a big deal because women using chan for men is reserved for mostly lovers and wives. Not girls to boys, women to men. Hearing a girl use chan for him makes Konohamaru feel emotionally exposed, especially when he's in a high-stakes fight such as this. It's akin to suddenly being called a pet name by a stranger who looks at you and they look like your first love. It's going to be something that is emotionally jarring for you. It also symbolizes emotional and psychological warfare. Matsuri didn't just attack his body, she also attacked his emotions by mimicking someone precious to him. Konohamaru hesitating, it proves how deeply words can affect the mind, a common theme in Japanese storytelling and even in real life samurai philosophy, and just the Japanese belief that words have power. It's called kotodama. That's what we're seeing it play here too. In Japanese culture, the way that you address someone, it directly reflects your relationship with them. That's why when you look at Naruto, and Naruto would call people by the wrong honorifics, someone like Sakura bust him over his head, it's for those reasons. In Western culture, calling someone by their first name is normal in casual relationships, but in Japan, the way that someone's addressed, it can make or break romantic tension. The last name plus san is a very polite but distant way of addressing someone that's typical in workplace settings. The first name with no honorifics, it's very intimate. It's often used with deep relationships. It can be for friends, it can be for something even deeper. Then when you get to kun for men, it's a cute but respectful way, and it is commonly referred to for boyfriends. The use of chan for men is super affectionate. It's typically used by girlfriends or childhood friends or girls that have crushes on a guy. The nicknames like say Kono-chan, it's extremely personal and it carries a huge romantic undertone with it. This is why in anime and manga, when a girl drops the honorific and she switches to chan for a guy, it's often treated as a massive relationship milestone, or it's often treated as foreshadowing for something that's about to come. Great examples of this would be how, like in Naruto, Hinata would call Naruto Naruto-kun before marriage, after marriage. It reflects her deep respect, but it also was foreshadowing, hey, Naruto's gonna end up with this girl. Then when you look at Sakura, Sakura was always calling Sasuke-kun. Even when married, it shows her unwavering affection. Naruto would call Sakura Sakura-chan and things of that nature. But Sakura did not return those affections, which is fitting given the fact that Sakura wasn't Naruto's first kiss. You know, Naruto got a thing for dark hair and special eyes, placing what Naruto's saying, yes, he had a crush on her, and that's how you viewed that. But the fact that even in adulthood, we have mediums where he still calls her Sakura-chan, that goes back to them being childhood friends. In particular, when they were on Team 7 during their 12-year-old to 17-year-old years. Being called Konohamaru-kun by Matsuri, it isn't just a name. It's a symbol of deep emotional confusion because it blurs the line between his enemy and his closest friend. It triggers those memories of Moegi that we saw, his most trusted female companion. It reminds him of feelings of Moegi that he has not confronted. It's a psychological impact. It is a battle of the mind that is taking place. By calling Konohamaru Konohamaru-chan, Matsuri has disarmed him emotionally. She's made him hesitate in a crucial life or death moment, which is why Jura weighed in for us as the audience. And it also reveals his hidden feelings for Moegi. This is why in Japanese media, words carry meaning. A single phrase can cause way more emotional impact than a dramatic battle, but we as Western fans, we don't catch a lot of that stuff. It might just sound like a cute nickname, but in Japan, using an intimate honorific in the wrong context is as shocking as someone saying I love you unexpectedly. So in conclusion, I'll wrap up and I'll say this because this is longer than I expected it to be. This looks like it's probably gonna be a 20-minute video. So honorifics in Japan, they carry deep personal meaning. Konohamaru getting called Konohamaru-chan, it shattered his emotional guard because it reminded him of Moegi. And it's a continuation of Japanese storytelling, basically valuing subtle emotional triggers versus being very overt like how we see in a lot of Western stories. For a lot of us, Konohamaru's actions seem like they just kind of came out of nowhere. They seem like they were overblown. But for your Japanese reader, you see this and you see Konohamaru's emotional turmoil, and it makes sense, especially when you start looking at the fox spirits that get used as a seductive deceiver in a lot of the Japanese folklore stories, where they disguise themselves as beautiful women and they seduce men. Fox spirits at times truly fall in love, while others simply use the romance to manipulate and kill the human. It's being reversed here. Konohamaru is behaving like the fox spirit because he is playing the trick on Matsuri to try and kill her. But this is also peppered with stuff like with the Yuki-onna, the snow woman, the famous folktale of the beautiful snow spirit who falls in love with the human man. She spares him under one condition: he must never tell anyone about her true nature. When he breaks the rule years later, she disappears forever, showing how love and death are intertwined in Japanese folklore. Matsuri's situation is similar. She is born from Moegi's chakra. Her love is both a weakness and a potential trap for Konohamaru, which is why we are where we are, with Matsuri being pissed off and Konohamaru having missed his chance. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Make sure to share this with anybody you know that is still confused about what's going on. Click here on the left for the Boruto chapter review. Click here up top for the video from my One Piece channel, or click here on the right for this video from my Anime Explained channel.